My name is Mike Bernhardt, and I am the editor of and also a contributor to an anthology of poetry called Voices of the Grieving Heart. I'm going to assume you're all at least aware of the book or you wouldn't be here. It's an anthology of 83 contributors who provided mostly poems and also some essays and some images that related to the loss of people that they loved. And all of these were contributed to me. None of them were sought out. And they were, I put out calls for submissions. And the purpose of it was really just to put together poetry that's true, that just doesn't make light and also doesn't stereotype the experience of grief. I think there's pretty much any aspect of grief that you could imagine is represented in this book, from just agonizing pain to humor to poems of healing, and because that's the human experience. So what we're going to do is we have, this particular event was organized so that people in the UK or Europe could easily attend. So we said it's 9 in the morning here in the San Francisco area of California. It's about 5 in the evening where you are. And what we're going to do is have, we had 6 contributors from the UK in this book. Unfortunately, one of them I have not been able to reach since she contributed the poem. So we have 5 people from the UK who will read today. We'll have 3, and then there'll be not exactly a break, but an opportunity to share your experience of hearing the poems or ask questions or whatever. Then we'll have 3 more. So because there's only 5 people from the UK here, 2 of them will read, and then I will read the poem that was contributed by the person who could not attend, as well as a couple of my own. And then we'll again have some opportunity for comment and sharing, and then we'll close up. If you notice, what we did was we gave the readers a time limit for their sharing or reading period. So if you hear a chime from my lovely wife, Yvonne Eugarte, who's there in the blue sweater, she has a little chime. If you hear that, that's what it means. It just means that she's giving them a 30-second warning. Let's see, what else have I missed? I think that's about it. If there's something else that I forgot to say, I'll spontaneously say it later. So what I would like to do now is introduce John Fox. John is the founder of the Institute for Poetic Medicine. He has been working with poetry as a means of healing, I think, for the majority of his life. And his commitment to that is just profound. And I will tell you, he also wrote 2 books. One is called Poetic Medicine, The Healing Art of Poem Making. And the first one was called Finding What You Didn't Lose, Expressing Your Creativity and Truth Through Poem Making. And he also was in a PBS, well, you're in England, I don't know if you know PBS, the Public Broadcasting System, which is a publicly funded television network here in the US. And they had a documentary called Healing Words, Poetry and Medicine. And he played a significant part in that documentary as well. So, John, take it away.
Mike, thank you so much. And what Mike doesn't say in that introduction is, like, if you turn the tapestry around of all those things that are true in my life, I met Mike maybe 27, 28 years ago. He attended a workshop I gave on poetry therapy at a school where I was teaching, and he was working on Voices, the first edition of Voices of the Grieving Heart at that time, and we had significant communication. And then the book came out, and I didn't hear from Mike. I still thought of him because I would refer to Voices quite, with frequency in my work. And then about 2 years ago, he called, and it was pre-pandemic, and he had some thoughts of things, of ideas of republishing this book. That wasn't the only thing, but we met maybe once or twice, and then throughout this last year of the pandemic, and so and it was easy to reconnect with that friendship that we had made back 27, 28 years ago. And so I like to just say that's an important reason why I'm here, I think. So Mike, thank you again. And I want to welcome each of you. I'm glad to be here, glad to acknowledge the participating poets who will read. And I want to welcome anyone attending this reading. I'll say a little bit more about Mike. In her testimonial for this book, the Palestinian American poet Naomi Shihab Nye writes, "Voices of the Grieving Heart, carefully curated by Mike Bernhardt, is a profoundly compassionate friend of a book." Careful, compassionate friend. Hear, hear, I say to you, Mike. So there are people, and they have names, to whom these poems are dedicated, are about, and are written in remembrance of loved ones, family, friends, and maybe even included some so-called strangers, and none of whom are here. Or maybe someone is here, and I don't know that. I can say this: if not for those dear ones and our loss of those beloved persons, we would not be here. What if Mike's first wife, Susan, had lived? Our loss and grieving comes before our writing, at least it seems so, but poem making, which often insists on making its surprising presence known at unkempt times, such as writing at 3 a.m. But whatever time, I think poetry writing, I think of poetry writing as if it were a function of the soul's immune system. I think we are fortunate in this regard to have allowed for this, even if writing a poem is involuntary, to allow your soul's immune system to help you find words for the unspeakable. That said, I'd like to take a few moments, or at least a few moments, and recognize the real gap, an unknown space, maybe even an empty place where that loved one belongs, that actually, even a little strangely, joins us all. What I'm saying is, let's take time right now and allow a gentle silence to permeate our unknowing and perhaps our emptiness. And maybe, Yvonne, you could ring the bell once, just as a way of beginning this. And please, let's settle into a more still, quiet place as we enter into the reading. Can't hear it. I think you may be on mute.
No, I'm not. I'll do it. I'll bang it. Hold on. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Yep. You can. Okay, people are nodding their heads. They can hear it.
I think this was a Zoom experiment gone awry. It's okay.
Well, I just wanted us to take a moment just to consider the person we've written about, and that everyone here is thinking of someone or someones.
Let's just take the moment without the chime, I think.
Voices is an exquisite, heartbreaking, and most importantly, a heart-opening anthology. Flowers are a perfect symbol for the grief and for grieving as much as they are for joy. These poems are these ever-living gathered flowers. The etymology of the word anthology, poetry anthology, is a flower gathering. This past year and a half plus of pandemic has come rip-roaring through our lives and caused a shattering around the planet, in countries, in communities, and for some, in your very home. By shattering, I mean loss. I believe at this upturning time, this book responds to a profound human need regarding loss. Grieving is a given, but bearing witness to its terrible beauty, staying with the indescribable, complex, and difficult nature of grieving can go missing. Staying with it is not only not a given, grieving is often avoided. We can prefer to lean upwards toward away from our fear, towards our wish to make truly raw feelings acceptable. More than anything, these poems and these poets about to read return us to a capacity to bear witness and to stay with. You'll discover that rather than making you unbearably sad and hopeless, these poems will hearten you with beauty, with the paradoxical wholeness of being human, with the blessings of love.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
That was wonderful. Yeah, as you were speaking, the last thing I wanted to say before we start the reading was that I completely forgot to mention how this book came into being, which was after the death of my first wife in 1991. I began to write poetry because I was compelled to do it. And I eventually started seeking out other people's poetry, and that became the first edition of this book, which was published in 1994. And you can find old copies on Amazon if you want. But so, yeah, as John mentioned, last year we started putting together this new edition, which is twice as big as the old one. I received, with more poetry submissions, a lot of poetry. There's so much grief out there right now. And so the first reader will be Jill Garrett. Jill Garrett. And Jill, unfortunately, has lost her camera, but she does have audio. So she will read, and you can just look at her lovely photo. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you, Mike.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me introduce you.
I have one more thing to say, Mike, before you do that. One
Yeah.
thing you might do as a way of listening is see if there's a line in someone's poem that catches your attention, or even a word, and jot that down. That's one of the ways we can respond, is by mirroring back or speaking back a line or a word in a poem that had resonance for you personally. Okay.
Okay. So Jill Garrett was in her 20s and working as a nurse when her mother died unexpectedly. She was devastated, but had little time to grieve as she took over her disabled father's care, got married, raised children, and worked as a healthcare worker and lecturer. It is only now, 40 years later, that she has truly been able to come to terms with her loss. She has found writing about it to be very therapeutic, and that the grief from so long ago is, quote, resurrected with amazing clarity, end quote. So on that note, welcome, Jill.
Thank you very much, Mike. Can I just start by saying how very pleased I am to have two poems in this book. It's a real privilege to be included in what I hope is going to be a book that many people can derive some degree of support and comfort from. So thank you for having my inclusions in your book.
You're welcome.
Now, my first two poems, the ones that appear in this book, relate to my response when Mum died. It was a very sudden, a very unexpected death, all that time ago in 1978. She was still quite young when she died. And I think that sometimes, especially for those of us who are carers, as I was for my father, I think we sometimes find that our need to deal with the living, to support and care for others who are also grieving, hinders our own ability to effectively deal with our grief. And 40 years after Mum's death, I still felt her loss very, very keenly. And the writing of these poems came out of my attempt to deal with my feelings and to make sense of what happened all that time ago. The Call. In the half dark of a summer night, air hangs heavy as I lie listening to my father's rhythmic breathing, unprepared for the shrill shock of the sudden call. Eons later, birdsong heralds a dawn I cannot believe you will not see. A strange sun rises in an alien sky, an unfamiliar world ahead. Early morning. The house stands sightless, blinded by death, hushed into silence by unspoken words, numbed by the cold hand of loss. But after the ham is eaten, the whiskey drunk, after the mourners emerge blinking from its confines, sensation will slowly, painfully return, the pins and needles of a new normality. This next poem relates to my father's response to my mother's death, and it refers to something that I think is very common. It's the very strong feeling that people have, bereaved people, that their loved ones continue to be present with them. And the title, The Present, refers to the wedding present of a mantel clock that had been given to them by my uncle on their marriage way back in 1936. The present. Time smelt of beeswax polish, tasted of the Sunday morning coffee drunk when he retrieved the key, put right an errand hand, checked with the BBC, wound up the week, their days of marriage measured out in careful, chiming quarters. When she was no longer there to dust, his grip too weak to grasp, time played tricks. They stood again, suited, veiled, opening the gift of a future long since ticked away. And my final poem speaks of the loss of another well-loved person. Llandequin, the place referred to in the poem, it's a beautiful, quite an isolated location in North Wales, not far from Porthmadog. And there are two Welsh words in this poem. The first one, in the title, cariad, means sweetheart or beloved, and tadci is the Welsh word for grandfather. Cariad. Last night, I dreamed that I retraced our steps, that I took you to Llandequin. I lingered a while by the shimmering lake, skimming memories across its silvered surface. Wound my way along that writhing road, familiar to our feet from 30 summers. Up to the chapel, crouching on the sheep-shorn hillside, abandoned to grass and graves and gnarled trees, bent as old men wearied with the weight of living. Where once the gate creaked open to a touch, velvet moss now saddled tumbled stone. Withered blooms in broken pots paid homage to the dearest mams, beloved tadkees, late of lonely farms and homesteads 500 feet below. But I climbed higher in the setting sun, to where the bones of an older landscape lay, sheep tracks the only waymarks. No stone to bear your name, your dates, but where wind in the gorse is the whispering of the dead, my breath inscribed Cariad on the breeze that carried you up into the darkening hills, and red kites circled in the evening sky to welcome you home. Thank you for listening, and thank you again, Mike, for affording me this opportunity to use the poems. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jill, for your wonderful poems. Too bad I didn't know about that last one. I would have included it in the book. It's beautiful, thank you. So our second reader is going to be Rosemary Palmyra. Rosemary was a contributor to the first edition of this book. And in fact, one of the poems that she included in the first edition was slightly revised when she sent it to me again for the second edition. But she has several pieces in the book this time, including an essay about her relationship to her grief and to her father, whom her writing is mostly about. And so I will read now her bio as it appears in the book. Rosemary Palmyra was very close with her father, but was not given any support after he died when she was 8 years old. She spent much of her life feeling like she was carrying a monstrous secret that no one would understand. After her first child was born, 22 years later, she finally found the courage to ask for help. Rosemary has been a therapist, social worker, teacher, translator, and widely published writer. She is now a child psychologist who works primarily with refugees and asylum seekers, paying it forward. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Mike. As you have heard, my father, Derek, died aged 36 from cancer. He was multiply bereaved during World War II by the deaths of his mother, 3 sisters, aunt, and 7 cousins, drowned in one passenger ship, traveling in convoy in 1941 from Lisbon to Southampton and torpedoed by Germans. He came in a ship behind, age 14. At age 18, he chose to be a non-combatant, and this wasn't accepted and led to 1.5 years in military prison. I only found that out recently. All this clearly affected his health. And I was 8 years old when he died. So the first poem is Cameo. Here was the gathering of the family in the peeling yellow hospital room. It was your birthday. It was the last time. We brought our gifts, our offerings. I wasn't going to do this. A bologna shell, pearl and blue rivers of heaven. Eau de cologne to dab your forehead. Coconut sweetmeat, a fold-out wonky zebra. Your favorite psalm, in my best handwriting. You, Father, the warm heart of us. You, the protective circle around us. Striving to stay, straining to leave, your face full of distance, distracted with pain. We didn't know you were already losing the horizons of flesh and time. Now it is we who have broken open. A river of perfume flows between us. No words, no endings to recall, only this stark cameo. All of you and all we would become comprehended in this relief. White silhouette raised upon the dark, your gift, the remembrance of love. From there, walking out forever into shifting and unknown ground. 20 years later, I was given a reel-to-reel by a friend of his, and so the next poem is called Holding Your Voice, an amazing experience. Holding your voice in my hands, your voice given back to me 30 years on, your voice looped reel to reel, turning me over. Such a young man's voice, a tender tenor, breaking slightly, slow and soothing, reading our stories. Leading us, like Aslan, through the doorway into magic lands. We were pilgrims on a hazardous journey, via the Slough of Despond to the Delectable Mountains. Our faces wrapped, absorbed in the great mystery of words. Beautiful, old-fashioned, piercing, potent, even to the edge of the Black River. Not just the words themselves, but the sounds, the images, the tones of carefulness and care, and the silence that wraps us close. You gave us love, love and hunger. When I was 60, I attended a funeral where more people were in the room that actually knew and remembered my father than I'd ever encountered. And I went away overwhelmed and re-grieving. Over 6 months, I wrote 24 letters to and from my dad and drew a life journey map. This was very healing and brought some closure. I also realized how I'd lost memory of the child I had once been. So this is Forgotten Child. After many years, I catch a glimpse, fair ponytail and sea green eyes, dancing over the tawny boulders, spinning and spinning in the sunlight, white organza dress translucent. Who are you? Why can't I know you? She runs to the door, beams at visitors, gives bread to the gypsy mother and babe. Before the long voyage north, before the father's death, the chrysalis years, before reality breaks through, skin smarting. Where are you now? How did I lose you? Born at the mouth of the Douro, she loves the river, loves the sea, throws herself full tilt into its roll, its pebble-spitting, somersaulting delirium. Floats blissful on a giant inner tube. Don't you know how much I've missed you? In the walled garden, she plays in the slant of shadow and light, sends Siamese kittens called hop, skip and jump through nets and tunnels, runs after Mischievous, the yellow duckling, not believing the day he turned white. She lies in the belly of the playhouse roof. Bright, pristine, innocent, whole, spinning and spinning across the sands, white organza dress translucent in the sun. I see you now. You have come back to me.
Oh,
And I'd like to say that Mike, I said it before, Mike is probably the only person to ask pertinent questions about how one's life might be defined by grief. I have belatedly realized how my life has replayed over, unconsciously, the stepping out from firm ground into amnesia and precarious ground, and that survival was like the journey of a turtle hatchling. I don't know if I've got time to fit this in, but this is called Blue Turtle. Like a Zakynthos blue turtle hatchling first dropped, a ping pong ball into the egg pitcher, pressed down by grain, you must clamber out of the chamber. Start your odyssey across dawn pink sand, nose down, searching for moisture. Older than dinosaur, fragile as a beetle, a small slate blue disc, arms akimbo. You skitter down inside dune hollows, leaving a winding wake. You must reach the sea before the sun is high and bakes the bone house hard. Your footpads flinch on scorched stone, galumph across spittled shore. The turtle tumbles into the water, drifts on the current with seagrasses, plankton, jellyfish, ballerinas. The sea's skin and sandy bed are honeycombed by sun and cloud, like the hexagon markings on its shell. Thank you very much.
ooh,
Thank you so much, Rosemary. One of the things I find in hearing you read your poems, hearing anyone read their poems, is how much more they move me. It's enough, it's so much even to read them, but to hear them spoken by the person who wrote them is just wonderful for me. So thank you. So our third reader for this segment is Yvonne Eugarte. Yvonne discovered while working as a nursing assistant in hospice that many patients just wanted her to sit with them. She often held their hands in their last moments. Bill, the poem, one of the poems that she'll be reading, was written for the multitude of nurses who have done that during the pandemic. Yvonne's son, Emile, died 23 years ago after 2 bouts of meningitis, just before turning 2. She has been writing poetry since she was 5. Known locally as an environmental poet, Yvonne was thrilled to perform one of her poems for over 300 people at a climate change rally in 2019. Welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you. This one is called I Will Not Let Go. Hold on tightly to my hand, Bill. Your family cannot come with you, but I am here. We must isolate you here in this room. I can see the fear in your eyes, though you cannot speak. If only you could see behind my mask, you would see there are tears in my eyes. Hold on tightly to my hand, Bill. I will be your family. I will say soothing words, and you will feel comforted in your last moments. Do not be afraid as you drift peacefully from this world to the next, for your legacy will live on in the hearts of all those whose lives you have touched. Hold on to my hand, Bill. I will not let go. I will not let go. Always gets me that. Whew. And the second one is about my son, who Mike's just said, and I do still feel him with me 23 years later. On those days that are sometimes, I don't know, a bit difficult, I feel his little arm saying, come on, Mum, you've got this, you can do this. And I wrote this when he was in the hospice, in the children's hospice. I've no idea, I think it was his words telling me because it's written through his eyes. The time had come, God called me home, but I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay with Rupert Bear, and even there with Poe. I wanted to kiss my mummy's face and stroke my daddy's hair. I wanted to jump on my brother's bed. There wasn't the time to spare. Love knew no limits for me down on earth, from my family, my friends, and my toys. There were earwigs and flowers and dancing and fun, the music and giggles and noise. My time there among you was cut very short, but a lifetime of laughter you gave, and it moves me to see all my family and friends sat there crying and trying to be brave, for I never knew violence or hatred or pain, and my world was filled only with love. So don't grieve for me now I am gone from your world. I am here in God's playground above. You'll all hear my voice in the breeze through the trees, so remember me only with joy, for though lent to you only, I live in your hearts as your special, unique little boy. Thank you. And the third one, my first husband, not Emil's dad, but my first husband, took his own life. He was bipolar. He was only 49 years old. And this was written for Nigel because we were really good friends. Even though we were divorced, we remained really good friends. As a husband and dad, he was second to none, a caring young man with a huge sense of fun. So why, when it seemed he had so much to give, did it day come he no longer wanted to live? He had a good job, was a Christian too. He believed taking his life was the wrong thing to do. A leader of scouts and reliable friend, a man upon whom he could always depend. Manic depression had plagued him for years. Blood tests and meds only fueled his fears. Support groups were helpful for just a short while, but soon the cracks showed, though he still tried to smile. This man on the edge was so loved by us all, and none of us saw when he started to fall. It was our son who found him. He was just 22. He was frozen in fear and not sure what to do. He took a knife from the drawer, cut his own father down, sat holding him crying for such a long time. It's been 15 years since that terrible morning. No reason, no note, so no closure, no warning. His dreams engulfed him. His meds were enough, and nothing could save him, not even our love. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for letting me share this very personal journey of mine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne.
I'm wondering if Yvonne, if you could read, if you would be willing to read the poem about your son again.
Yes.
It's-
You mean now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. The time had come, God called me home, but I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay with Postman Pat, with Rupert Bear and Poe. I wanted to kiss my mummy's face and stroke my daddy's hair. I wanted to jump on my brother's bed, but there wasn't the time to spare. Love knew no limits for me down on earth, from my family, my friends, and my toys. There were earwigs and flowers and dancing and fun. There were music and giggles and noise. My time there among you was cut very short, but a lifetime of laughter you gave, and it moves me to see all my family and friends sat there crying and trying to be brave. For I never knew violence or hatred or pain, and my world was filled only with love. So don't grieve for me now I am gone from your world. I am here in God's playground above. You will all hear my voice in the breeze through the trees, so remember me only with joy. For though lent to you only, I live in your hearts as your special, unique little boy. Thank you.
Thank you.
I love how you've really captured the joy in that poem.
Yeah, it was a joy. It's still a joy. Wherever he is, is still a joy, still a force to be reckoned with. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Mhm.
Something that Rosemary said about her poem, in her poem, is not just the words themselves. And hearing your poem, Yvonne, it's like the word play that you bring to life, I think is, you know, it has a kind of energy and flow that is not accessible in like just regular conversation. And like the sounds, that's what Rosemary had said about being able to sort of just, and I wonder, so here I am in this sort of pause between our readers. Rosemary, I'm wondering, and I'll just begin, and I hope other people will chime in, but do your poems, because your work is as a child psychologist, it's with, you know, has been with children. I wonder if your poems have helped you find your way back to that place in yourself. Maybe, I don't want to make an obvious question, but it feels to me like the poem becomes a path that you can access your own childlikeness. Is that true?
Yeah, I guess you want to help children that are suffering the way you have, and that's. I think it's true that anyone in social care is probably trying to care for themselves. And I've always been attracted to outsiders because I've always felt an outsider. And of course, refugees and asylum seekers are the ultimate outsiders. And I feel more at home with them than I do with your average, you know, okay, Joe. And I can, the other thing I've learned is that I can sit through people's pain. And that's what you have to be able to do, especially with refugees. And that's, you don't have to say anything, but you have to know how to sit through it. And I think that's the thing I've learned from my own experience. That's something I can give.
Can I just intercept there? I was brought up in care. I was fostered and then adopted. I was put into care at 8 months old. And I think that's given me the empathy. I think because of the struggle that I've had throughout my life. I mean, I do see my adoptive mother occasionally, but she's very cold, very hard person to. But I think it's given me the empathy to reach out, and I work as a one-to-one in a primary school, and I work with children who bang to a different drum. So I was just thinking about you, Rosemary, thinking it's given me something, given me something. Do you know what I mean? I can't really put my finger on it, but yeah. I think our paths lead us on to do different things. Yeah, definitely.
You recognize the signs.
Yes. Yeah. It's like something waving at me like an antenna, and it's like, woo, I'm straight in there. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is there something in Jill's poems that anybody would like to comment on that, you know, there was just a flow of chat comments made, Jill, and but does anybody have something they could mirror back to Jill or to say to her about the about hearing Jill's poems?
I think I'll just comment, the thing that I liked about Jill's poems when she first sent them to me was the real sense of both of those poems really sort of, to use a line from Rosemary's poem, they really kind of capture the sense of walking out onto shifting and unknown ground. I'm paraphrasing, I know, but you know what I mean. And that sense for me was so potent after my first wife died, to just sort of stepping out into a new world that I didn't know anymore. And Jill really captured that very beautifully in her poems.
Did other people feel that too? There was the last line, I think, Jill, in the poem, it went unfamiliar world ahead.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think all of us are just astonished that the sun rises
Ooh,
and continues to, or arcs across this gorgeous blue sky. You can't believe it. And people rush by you on the way to their day, and you're just appalled that they are doing such mundane things when your entire world has just kind of stopped. So I've really loved, I've liked everyone's poems, but that stanza that Jill has where she talks about the alien sky, the strange sun in the alien sky, really struck me a lot, actually.
Rose, when you spoke about, like, you said the word stop, and there was a Jill, in your poem with that line, unfamiliar world. What moved me so deeply was the pause between when the word ahead came. Like, it let me feel your poem as a place that I was in. Does that make sense to anyone else, that the way the poem is given is that there's room in it to become more part of it?
Yeah, and I really liked the numbed by the cold hands of time. That really resonated. I loved that line, Jill. That was really cool.
I'm glad our poets are talking among each other, but I also welcome our guests to speak up too. A number of people I can't see because your video isn't on, but I want you to feel like your voices really matter here too. Could someone, if you want to, say something in response to one of the poets or all of them?
Just to say, there's quite a few comments on chat.
Yeah.
That the individual poets can see.
Val, did you have some? Yeah, she did. Red Kite Circle.
Comments.
Red Kite Circle, gorgeous. Red kites. Let's see. Anyone else who's listening?
I'm interested that you picked up. Sorry, Rosemary, what was that?
I just said I like the clock ticking away at the end.
Oh.
I think I'm interested, John, that you picked up about the shifting sands that we're on, because I think this is different with each bereavement. We all in our lives experience multiple bereavements, and you can't generalize because how you respond to one, I don't think is any indication as to how you will respond to another. And the world is different in each situation.
Yeah. I wonder if the poem helps us to realize that, the poem and its uniqueness. You know, it reminds us that everybody's experience is uniquely theirs.
Well, these poems do. I wish I found this book 30 years ago, or something like it, because I just, someone had given me this insipid book of poems, and it just was actually, no, it minimized my grief. So I like these.
Wow. Who wrote the line, who responded to the line, time smelt of beeswax polish? Oh, that's Davina. Are you here, Davina?
Yeah, I'm here.
Could you say something about whose poem was that? Time smelt of beeswax polish.
Williams, I think.
That was in mine.
Yeah, I like. I always like poems that have that kind of the kind of evocation of other senses. So yeah, it reminded me of. Weirdly, it reminded me of T.S. Eliot and W.H. Auden, actually. Yeah, but I love things that evoke. You know, it's like the Madeleine moment in Proust, isn't it? You know, that kind of that a very small thing. And smell is so particular that it can throw us back. into being in the presence of someone who's not there. Yeah.
Ooh,
Yes.
I hate to interrupt this
Yeah.
discussion, but we're going to move on right now. And
thanks
I
to
think-
everybody. Thanks to everyone who commented this time. And
yeah, we'll have another opportunity to speak, and then I mean, the truth is we can keep the meeting open and people can just converse after it's officially over as well, if you'd like to. I just want to make sure that
yeah, of
some
course.
people may have to leave, so I want to make sure we have time for
Yes.
everything. So, welcome back to the poetry, not that we ever left. Our next reader is Rose Drew. Rose's first daughter, Sarah, died in 1989 from sudden infant death syndrome. Rose had previously loved to write, but she couldn't for many years after losing Sarah. Hearing that Rose had once written poetry, a neighbor encouraged her to attend an open mic event. A few months later, Rose began to write again. Aside from writing, she now runs a small publishing company called Stairwell Books. You can read more about Rose has, aside from the poems in the book, she's also got an essay. Rose is also the publisher of a collection of poetry by Rosemary Palmyra, which I sadly cannot remember the name of at this moment. It's Blue Saxophone.
Blue saxophone. Blue saxophone. It's got a gorgeous cover. That's
yeah,
lovely.
it really does.
Full of good stuff.
So welcome, Rose.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And I'll probably end up sobbing at one point. I'll try not to. I seen when Mike asked me, sent this email, how do I get hold of Rosemary Palmyra? I wrote back, well, what's it about? You know, because I'm a good publisher, trying to make sure not some crackpot. And he told me briefly, I guess, maybe it was in the original email. And I forwarded the information on. I said, you know, I have a few poems about that. And I ended up sending them some. And you've kindly included them, Michael. And I thank you very much, because I've run a poetry open mic for a long time, and I'm a performance poet. And I have gamely tried to do a couple of these poems at regular events, and I do them rarely because they don't often fit. And it's just not the thing you do, or I'll cry. I think Yvonne was that one where I just sobbed. And, you know, so you try not to, or you don't. So this was a really a pleasure. And I'm going to read one or two from the book, and then I'll read, I realized all the ones that are here are from later on in the journey. And this is one I wrote when I first went back to writing, when Emily was 5, my second daughter. And then I wrote like about 80 poems. And this is one of the ones that I wrote early on. And I was amazed that I was able to go back and capture that period, because I couldn't write right after she died. Moth to a flame. The children. I am drawn to them. I study them. I talk to them. They smile up at me or gaze gravely into my eyes like they know. Exquisite torture for my clumsy loss, my inept parenting. I stand close enough to smell baby shampoo. I feel warmth glowing from chubby arms reaching for another mommy. Saturday morning at Sears in the kitchen store next to washers and stoves. They cling to shopping parents or are strollered or held, all so beautiful and fresh and pure. And I gaze into the untouchable sun brightness of them until tears burn my eyes and I busy myself with their parents' paperwork. It was, yeah. You know, and for many years, I just didn't cry at all until one day I was watching this Alpo commercial, the dog food, with this little girl and a tiny puppy. And then the girl's older and the dog's older. Then the girl goes off to college and the dog is limping to the door. And by the time it ended, I was just sobbing. And Emily was probably 4, and she comes up to me, she's like, "What are you doing?" And she'd never seen me cry before. And she touched one of the tears. I just didn't cry for years. After Sarah died, I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, and then I stopped. And I put her away carefully in a box. and just didn't cry at all. I mean, we saw Shakespeare in Love, and I was like, yeah, right. Who cares?
Oh.
And I just turned everything off. And then when I started writing again, a lot of them are sad poems or they're bitter. And this one is written because of how grief stays with you, and also, especially when you've shoved it away. I met a woman at a Compassionate Friends meeting, and her son had jumped to his death off the top of the stadium during an Ozzy Osbourne concert. You've probably heard of this kid. And she stopped all the pain and then proceeded to drink herself into a stupor. And she was at this event and she talked about it. And she said, when you stop the pain for many years, it doesn't really go away. It just comes back later. And I think that might be why when I finally started writing again, all these poems were like bitter, 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 or whatever. And I might read a tiny bit of another one if I have time. You're going to be ringing them chimes, Yvonne, I'm telling you. And this is something, 7 candles. Tomorrow is a different kind of birthday. The 7th one so far away from me, it's not for celebrating with a party nor wondering what new gift you'd want to see. No, with this birth, you left this earth on your journey. You both slept and you awakened with one sigh. Your essence fading faster than a memory, that which made you special, turned and waved goodbye. If you hadn't planned on staying, why'd you bother with the living and the leaving in such haste? There's a woman in the grave who lies beside you, and I'm the one who lives on in her place. So tomorrow is your other different birthday, the 7th one so far away from me. Though the years have brought me peace, I remember when you slipped and leapt into eternity. Now, the things that she gave me are in this poem called Unbirthday. Unbirthday. I wished for peace, I have it now, a gentle giving back of you, hard-won peace, so betrayed by fate, by life, by you. So many times this day is just a secret. When women talk of birth, compare notes and battle scars, me too, I want to shout, me too, I have advice on first versus second birth, on drugs, pros and cons, on how no 2 pregnancies are the same, nor labor, nor child. Ask me, I know. I wait and wait past years, past decades, past even grief, and still I cannot let your life fall carelessly from my lips, revealing all I know. Not pity do I want or need, just you. The realness of you. Our adventures of birth and bath, smiles and howls, first time moments, bittersweet, but sweet, all the same. My birth too. I love how you've changed me, forced courage from me, empathy, anger, passions I had left behind or maybe never had, gifts. What expensive gifts. This heart that breaks, these eyes that weep, my wild urge to shield children and my arms to soothe and listen. Remind them they are love made life, 100 years of promise. I love this. And what I take from this day is strength, hope, finality, a tiny moment of furious loss, a glance at your rare photograph, and then just another day. I wished for peace. I do have it now. A gentle giving back of you, no beaten breast, no rent clothing. And on birthday of the most unsplendid kind. Now, if I
Rose,
yes,
what's the last line or two? I didn't quite get it.
Yes, sorry, I swallowed the words. I apologize.
No apology needed, but I'd love to hear them.
I wished for peace. I have it now. A gentle giving back of you, no beaten breast, no rent clothing. And on birthday of the most unsplendid kind. And I think there is, I don't know how much time I have, but there's a book of poetry someone put out called How Much Time Do I Have? And it really is where you get to it at an event like this. There's a long poem I will not read all of. And besides, I just crush myself in the middle, but I talk about it all, that I had to go do something getting my face scraped with sand, you know, to get rid of the wrinkles that we got. I got a frown that developed between my eyes within 6 months of her death. And I was trying to scrape it off. And I happened to go on the day that was her anniversary of the day she died. And I was laying there and I was thinking about all these things. And I thought about how that day was rough. It really was always the night before, because I wish I could go back in time and tell myself, you know. And so I just going to read a tiny bit from that. I don't scream back through time anymore, trying to dial up that happy young mother, stranger to true loss. I give her last night of perfection. I give her laughter, the bliss of a small, soft face to kiss, that sharp, pinching tug on her nipple every time, but relaxing to a peaceful flow of milk, ancient as all mammals, ever first mother and first child in their timeless act, and I leave them there. When I began my turning away, head thrust to a new horizon, the tug of them would draw me back, helplessly watching to the window glass of loss and deprivation. Tiny Tim Rose out in the snow, little match girl Rose, homeless Rose cast from Eden, till the pain of staying became the pain of leaving. And that really is, I think, what it is. And I think that's what you really have to kind of do. You have to finally find a place in your life where these folks live in your heart. Otherwise, it can just eat you alive. Anyway, I thank you very much for including me in this book. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. I love the passion with which you read. It's really wonderful. It's so much more comes through than just the words. So our next reader is Maggie Jackson. Maggie and her partner Tim lived together for 25 years. And for half of that time, Tim endured chronic ill health. After he died, grief inspired her reading of poetry, vignettes, monologues, and reflections, which many people found helpful. She had the privilege of being poet in residence at an Anglican monastery and published Offertory, a collection of poems from that beautiful experience. 10 years after losing Tim, Maggie says that life is meaningful and fulfilling again, but she still feels incomplete without him. Welcome, Maggie.
Thank you. I think first of all, I want to thank everyone for the timing of this launch event, because tomorrow is the anniversary of my partner Tim's death. It's actually 15 years ago, not 10. So it's good to share my poems as I inevitably think of him. The two poems in the book are among the shortest that I've ever written. And both of them were written within a year or 2 years of losing Tim. And both of the poems were also written during writing workshops, and are examples of poems that somehow just appear on the page and seem to write themselves. I always think of Ted Hughes's poem, The Thought Fox, where he describes this kind of experience where as a writer, you don't seem to have anything to do with it, but the words just appear. I think the poems in the book came to speak on my behalf in a way. They gave my deepest emotions a voice. And I found that by sharing them, they help other people to express their sorrows and hopes too. With the two poems in the book, I find that they act as a kind of yardstick or touchstone. They help me check how I am and can help release pain or recognize new growth. So the first poem is called, excuse me, Calling Me Meg. Tim was the only person who has ever actually called me Meg. Everybody else calls me Maggie. I could choose a heartful heaven, choirs and flights of angels, exaltation, peace, freedom from pain, everlasting joy, coming home to a compassionate God. That heaven I could predict and would quickly find lacking. The heaven I hope for would last only a moment and be held in a single word, in hearing your voice calling me Meg. I'm losing my voice now. So the second poem in the book is My Next Love. My next love will be shameless, careless, freewheeling, cartwheels of joy, passion bursting with creative pleasure. My next love will be easy and painless. My next love will be an inheritance of all that you, my lost beloved, willed to me. My experience of bereavement, not just with Tim, but with many other relatives, friends, and I would add amongst those friends several dogs that I've loved and have written about, has enhanced my own capacity for compassion. And some of my poems describe other people's journeys through grief and beyond. And one of these I'd like to read is called All Right Now, which was written about 5 years ago, when a builder working in my house opened up about his wife's illness. In the midst of a very practical activity, we found common ground and consolation. All right now. Simon, my builder, lies full length on his belly on the kitchen floor, reaching under the units with his hammer and nails, measuring and sawing, spirit leveling, squashing his huge hands between joists and frames. His denim jeans stretch over his backside and don't quite meet his well-worn top. A man of few words, he likes his tea strong, with milk but no sugar, and it often goes cold. I tell him how much I admire his work, his precision and craftsmanship, his determination to fix things, to not be beaten by a difficult job. I didn't go to school, he says, from under the sink. They couldn't keep me in, so I went to work with my uncles and learned my trade from them. And as he saws and hammers, he tells me more of his days as a roadie, a roofer, a landlord, and his years as a husband and a dad. I nearly lost my wife, he says, and his gruff voice softens. He shoves his shoulders further under the sink. She had that breast cancer, really aggressive, and it was touch and go, you know. Maybe it's holding nails in his teeth or his chest being flattened on the floor that makes his voice constrict. He coughs a bit and clears his throat, still working away, not catching my eye. It's been 5 years now, and she seems all right. She's changed, you know, she's got big and has got curly hair. I wait for his next comment, wanting him to prise himself from the cupboard and sit with a cuppa on the bench in the garden near the roses. A place to cry if he wants and be given a hug. But Simon works on as he speaks of his wife, how scared he's been, how he loves his Val, how she means the world to him. Unseen by Simon, I wipe tears from my eyes. At last he shuffles backwards and lays down his tools. He looks at his completed carpentry and nods his head. That's sorted it, he says, with a touch of pride. You'll be all right now, lass, he smiles at me. Thank you, Simon, I reply. You'll be all right too.
Mm.
And there's one more poem, if that's okay, with a short one, which is called And Then Came the Bird. And this describes a time of movement beyond grief, with a realization that love comes in many forms, even in that of a bird.
Maggie, could you read that one again?
That love comes in many forms.
Yeah, that last one that slipped past so fast.
Even in sorry, do you mean read what I just said?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. This poem describes a time of movement beyond grief, with a realization that love comes in many forms, even in that of a bird.
Wow.
So this is the poem. A bench in a rose garden brings memories of sitting alongside, of being my beloved's beloved. This evening in June, there is room for another. An absence prepares to be replaced by union. The roses cast their fragrance, making the garden a bridal bed, ready at last for the meeting of was and shall be. Beside me on the bench, the presence of love takes his place and silently waits. And then came the bird, singing as only a blackbird can, like heralding bells. Thank you.
Oh, wow.
Wonderful, Maggie. Thank you so much.
Lovely poem.
Thank you.
Yeah, lovely.
Okay. One of the things for me with listening to all of your poems is that the same thing happens to me as when I first read them, which is I tend to cry a lot too. And so I'm going to read a couple of my own. I'm going to read Lucy's. I think I'll read hers first. And we'll see what happens to me. So I'll just introduce Lucy, even though she's not here, and then I'll read her poem, and then just a couple of mine. Lucy Trevitt wrote her poem in response to the tragic death of a young friend, but she has also dealt with a number of deaths herself. An artist and a poet, Lucy has lived with significant illness and disability for most of her life. She says, "My creative process accompanies me as a necessity. It is the alchemy for navigating my life and enables me to transform my experiences into their essence and their healing." And I don't know if anybody could say better, really, what the power of poetry is. So her poem is called "There is a Love Born of Tears." There is a love born of tears and a love born from tears, a crack of hope born from this weeping. I breathe deep and long in an attempt to come home to myself, and I breathe empty and full in an attempt to come home to you. I sing daily songs of sacrifice. I see the small joy of a daffodil reaching into its blooming from under ice. Some days there is only this reminder, and my startled answer to your unvoiced words. Some days there is only this moment, followed by the next one. As I remember that I do not know, that I have not yet stood out in the rain today, and have not yet spoken to God, that I have come this long way to reach you, to learn that love carries sorrow within it.
Mm. Beautiful.
So,
Mike,
yes.
you know, I think since Lucy's not here and so she can't say more, why don't we hear that poem again, if you don't mind me asking?
Sure,
Thank
I
you.
can do that. Oops, let me find it again. There is a love born of tears, and a love born from tears, a crack of hope born from this weeping. I breathe deep and long in an attempt to come home to myself, and I breathe empty and full in an attempt to come home to you. I sing daily songs of sacrifice and see the small joy of a daffodil reaching into its blooming from under ice. Some days there is only this reminder and my startled answer to your unvoiced words. Some days there is only this moment, followed by the next one. As I remember that I do not know, that I have not yet stood out in the rain today, and have not yet spoken to God, that I have come this long way to reach you, to learn that love carries sorrow within it.
Thank you.
So I will read two poems of my own. One is called, the first one is called Secret Message. So I was 34 when my first wife died at the age of 31. And this is it. I hear you in my voice, now that yours is stilled forever. I hear you in my voice, an inflection or choice of words, shrugging my shoulders in that certain way. Now a secret message between us. It's all I have left of you. Oops, okay. And the last poem I'm going to read was, well, it references the woman who's now my wife, who's sitting here with us, Yvonne Eugarte. It's called Time Passes. Bright red dragonfly hovers by my face, slips off and returns again and again. Cat watches with vague interest from his shaded lair under the patio table. Yvonne tends the flowers, picks a zucchini and strawberries for dinner. Life continues now as if you had never been here, though I am here because of you. Your death connected me forever to what lies beyond this world. I felt that light inside me always. Rudderless, beguiled, I longed to join it. But time passes. Yvonne is smiling at me. We talk of dreams and having children. This garden is exploding with life, and I am no longer in any hurry to leave.
That's wonderful.
I like how Maggie's last poem in spirit was so much like this one. It's really about finding space to love again. So, John, I guess I'll just ask, and John can kind of moderate a bit. Of course, we've had a lot of comments going on through the chat, but I wanted to ask if anyone, including non-readers, would
Yes.
like to share anything,
Yeah.
talk about their experience here, or if you have any questions, that sort of thing.
Yes. What's it like to listen to these poems for the guests who are here?
For me, they're very beautiful. Yeah, and they're very stilling.
Stilling.
Yeah, they take me to a very still place, which is very useful. Yeah. And I just think, okay, so I did my PhD about grief and loss. So I've been around a lot of stories of grief and loss, and I think they're really important because I think they open up a space where people can feel and can tell their own stories. So I think that, yeah, fantastic. You're all fantastic.
Thank you so much.
I felt producing a third anthology.
Say that again, please.
Joe, I'm interrupting you. I was just going to say, will there be an anthology number 3? As I think this, especially over the last year, there's been so much loss and so much grief that there's probably room for a lot more.
Can I say something to that, Mike?
Sure, John.
Just quickly, because I know our time is Val. Actually, when Mike and I conferred over this past or last year now, you know, the pandemic and exactly as you say, came up. And that's when we put out a call to the Institute for Poetic Medicine, and a wave of responses came back. So that included 38 new poems, and a number of them are in this new section called Pandemic. So I have a sense that this book actually meets what you're talking about, although certainly there is going to be more.
One of the things that I probably won't do a volume 3. The second edition included everything that was in the first one, but now has twice as much. And yeah, theoretically, I could probably double in size again. But what I do plan to do, and I guess this is a bit of an invitation, is on my website, I'm going to be setting up, as I get some contributions, I'm going to be setting up a blog where if people want to send me their poems, I'll post them on the blog so that people can see them. So that at least is an option to get more poems about grief and healing and living, really, out into the world so they can be seen.
I just wanted to mention, I like the thread where the death has connected me to life now. In Mike's poem and Maggie's poem, both related that the death had instigated how your life was going on now. It's been a lovely evening.
Hi,
Hello.
Claudia.
Was someone speaking?
I was speaking. Is that all right?
Glenda,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Glenda.
That's okay. I know Rosie and the blue saxophone. I lost a daughter about 15 years ago, suicide, and I have done a bit of writing, but I had never thought of writing poetry about her death and my grieving. So thank you, because I think I'll use poetry to explore that a little bit more. And across a lot of the poems, the idea that person in grief sits with you, it's just always going to be a part of you. That's something I've only really worked out recently. I thought I'd get to a place where it would be all right, but it's never going to be all right. And thank you. It's nice to, I guess it's nice to share that, to know that you know, that it's not just me who can't sort this out and get to a new place. That, you know, I still cry spontaneously at whatever moments, and it just crushes me, and when I'm not expecting it to, can feel really fragile, and that's come across in quite a few of the poems. And so thank you for writing them. Thank you for being vulnerable enough for writing them and reading them.
Well, thank you for
That's really good.
sharing
Yeah,
that.
people think that grief has a time limit, and it doesn't.
No. And there's a lot about that in this book. I don't know if you have a copy of it. There's actually a number of people who wrote about suicides. And yeah, I think both suicides and children, I don't know how one ever gets over that, honestly. I mean, it's and that was one of the things that was so, by the way, I just want to mention we are over time. I'm fine with that, but I just wanted to acknowledge it. So we can keep going for a few more minutes, but of course, you're all free to leave anyway, but if you need to leave, please do. And thank you so much for coming. But I'm happy to keep chatting for a while. So I guess they're leaving now. What I will say just before we continue talking then is just, yeah, my book is called Voices of the Grieving Heart. You can go to the website, mikebernhardt.net, and there's a page there where you've got various places to order. And you'll also find a number of people have recorded their poems, and I've got them posted on the website so you can, as we did today, see people read, which is really nice. And Jill is there actually with a working camera. And there's, I think, 6 or 7 people there right now, and I hope to have more. So yeah, one of the things that I learned was that I think partly because I was young and partly because I met Yvonne, that the hole that was left by Susan's death was filled by somebody new. Of course, they're not the same person. And, you know, losing Susan changed everything for me. And I'm here because of her. But one of the things I learned in receiving essays from people like Rosemary and and Rose and some of the other people is that, especially with children, and I think from my experience of poetry with suicide, you don't get over it. The hole is never filled. And I think people expect that, but it's just not the reality. The hole will never be filled. So, yeah.
The thing that really surprised me is that though the bereavement in my life was 50 plus years ago, I've only just realized, you know, in my 60s, if you like, that, and I work with children with PTSD or whatsoever, et cetera, that I actually suffered PTSD, only I never called it that. And I suffered a depressive breakdown at university, and I didn't actually know that that was what was happening. And the PTSD now manifests anytime I've had some kind of a shock or bullying experience. I go into this place of, I do a freeze, I do a blank out, and I put it somewhere for like a week or longer until I feel ready to deal with it. And I've been doing that all my life unconsciously without even thinking about it. But now that I can think about it, it's my coping mechanism. So anything that shocks me, I have to freeze it and put it to one side. And I'm never going to get over that. And that's okay. But it's kind of interesting to reflect that that's how your life has been. And thinking about Glenda as well, that, you know, you have these unconscious reaction mechanisms, and you don't discover till you're older, maybe, but you have to learn to live with it, and also love yourself and love the person, and it's okay to cry as much as you like. I really approve of crying. Okay.
Well, I think we will call this an evening. I want to thank you all very much for coming. This was really, I mean, enjoyable isn't a word one would normally use for something like this, but it was really enjoyable. It was rich and beautiful, and just deeply satisfying to sit in this space with you. And so thank you so much for coming. Thank you to the contributors for sending me your poems and for reading them here today.
I'm taking a shower. I'm taking a shower. Bye, honey. I'm going to take a shower.
Yeah.
Got my
I think that's a really good ending.
Shower.
I think that's
it's all full circle. I think that's lovely.
I know.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't think we could end. We couldn't end on a better note than that. That's beautiful.
Who had the line about standing out in the rain, you know?
Thank you for organizing all of this, Yvonne and Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you,
Thank
and
you.
good night
Thank
now.
you all. It's been wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mike.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.